It is currently 7:20 p.m. Why did I think that I could record, edit, and complete a video in 5 hours? I don't know, but we're doing it anyway. Call this a Worth the Kids video because I am a clown. Hiya, I'm Jaya Papaya, and welcome to Webtoon Wednesdays. For the month of February, I'm going to be covering 4 amazing romances that you should definitely read that are on Webtoon, starting with one of my favorites, LUFF. Now, I do want to say, admittedly, I am so sorry, Arichaga, because I'm not nearly going to give this series the love and justice that it deserves because it is absolutely fantastic, but I'm going to try to do my best. So, hope you like it. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the series, let me give you a little synopsis of what happens. Our main character is Beatrix Torres, or Bia, who has ambitions to work on a Mars colony that is in the works for the UAE. However, the only problem is that she can't receive her scholarship without a LUFF score. LUFF was originally a dating app that people just used here and there, but eventually became so popular it became a central force and the backbone of society in Taloa. So Beatrix goes and makes an appointment at the LUFF office to get her score. She puts in her fingerprints, they put her through the database, and for the first time ever, she has 2 matches as opposed to just one who was supposed to be her soulmate. This causes her to meet the 2 secondary characters, Daniel and Julian. Both of them have their flaws and their strengths. However, hijinks ensue as Beatrix goes on a quest to figure out which one does she really need in order to get to space. Similarly, the boys try to figure out how they can help use Bia and their scores to get out of their own situations. Daniel wanting to escape the toxic environment of his home, and Julian wanting to support his family. Now, the LUFF system isn't easily defeated, considering it's become so integral to Taloa's system. There are other characters that you see who are affected by the LUFF system, and the entire series revolves around the characters fighting for their freedom and independence. Now, for those of you who are already LUFF fans, and those of you who are interested in the series, you probably picked up on that I mentioned 3 primary characters, one of which being female and the other 2 being male. You already know where this is going. Yep, it's a love triangle. Except, it's not only a love triangle, and that's what makes LUFF so great. Now, here's the thing about love triangles. You can love them, you can hate them, but ultimately you are never going to get rid of them. They are a staple when it comes to romance. But, in my personal opinion, I feel like love triangles are used at their best when they're used for other things besides romance. Let me explain. On the surface, LUFF looks like it's going to turn out to be your typical story. Bia, even though she doesn't want a boyfriend originally, will eventually fall in love with one or both of the men, and eventually she'll be happy. But that's not what this love triangle does. You can tell from the beginning, if you look at the clues between all 3 of the characters and their ambitions, that none of them, and I mean none of them, were ready for romance. Think about it. Julian barely had his life together. He was so stressed out from supporting his family, he barely had any time for personal growth. Daniel grew up in a very toxic environment with his mother and absent father. He doesn't know how to love. He's barely experienced it himself. And Bia spent her entire life striving to go to Mars. She's never had time to develop personal relationships outside of her family and her friend Lily. How would she ever be able to be a girlfriend if she barely had any time to get to become her own friend? Oh, and don't worry, if you think these might be spoilers, these are all traits that are revealed in the first couple introductory chapters of these characters. They're all here and there. I'll make sure to put a warning for the spoilers though. So, how do you make a love triangle romance when one of the characters doesn't even want a partner and the other 2 are absolutely emotionally stunted and not ready for a girlfriend? Well, that's because the love triangle aspect really isn't the love triangle you think it is. It's mostly the characters coming together and learning about what they want and how to achieve it. We're dabbling a little bit into spoiler territory, so if you haven't read the series, I highly recommend you go and do so. It's completely finished, so you can binge it all right now. Trust me, it is a great series. Totally worth the couple hours you'll spend just savoring the art and the story. But for everyone else, we're going to get started with the rest of the plot in 3, 2, 1. Alright, spoiler time. The country of Taloa operates on a class basis, which is determined by your LUFF score. Your LUFF score is the compatibility between you and your soulmate. Bia's parents are middle class because they have a pretty decent LUFF score. I want to say it's in between the 60s and 70s, which is fairly decent. Daniel's parents are very high up. I want to say in the 80s, borderline 90s, and they're very well off. His mother's extremely wealthy, and his father has a lot of influence. Then you have Julian's parents, whose love score is absolutely pitiful. It is horrible. If I remember correctly, I think it's 17%, which is terribly bad. He's been in poverty for basically his entire life, and it's all he knows. But here's the kicker about the love system. Bia's parents understand each other very well. They get along quite nicely, and I would argue that they're in love. Julian's parents are absolutely head over heels for each other, and they've been in love ever since high school. Daniel's parents, despite their very high score, absolutely hate each other, and his father's almost never around. Because of this, each character sees the love system as a way to escape their current situations and achieve their goals. Julian sees his high score with Bia as a chance to get out of poverty and support his family. Daniel sees his high score with Bia as a chance to escape his home and finally have some independence away from his mother, who's a bit of a control freak. Bia simply sees it as a way to get her scholarship and head off to Mars. So none of these characters really want to love the other person. They just want the benefits of having a good love system. And that's where the drama starts. Love is kind of set up like The Bachelor. Bia spends one day with one suitor, and then she spends the other day with the other, as a way to try and narrow down which decision is ultimately the best for her love score and her scholarship. However, the more time she spends with Julian and Nyane, or Daniel, I think that's how you say Nyane, she kind of starts to develop feelings for them. However, it's debatable if they were truly romantic feelings. Sure, she kisses both of them, she has sex with both of them, but when she really has to talk about who she loves, she never really decides. She still seems to hesitate. You could argue it's because Bia didn't want to hurt their feelings, but to that I'd say look at her fight with Lily over her love triangle. Bia doesn't seem like the type to really worry about sensitivities until it's too late. So I have a hard time believing it was truly out of altruism for the men's hearts. Speaking of Bia's fight with Lily, if you read very, very carefully, you can notice that almost every single conflict in the series isn't interpersonal. It's just repressed feelings about the love system. When Bia and Caro have their heart-to-heart, it's because Caro got pregnant outside of the system. When Bia and Lily fight, it's because Bia believed that Lily was exploiting the system, to which Lily rightfully called her out for doing the same thing. When Julian and Nyane fought, even though it was short-lived, it was ultimately because they were scared that they were going to lose Bia and lose their opportunity to escape the system. This is why having a love triangle was such a great idea on Arachaga's part, because we never really got upset or angry at any of the characters for their actions because they were honestly just repressed emotions. Even when Daniel had his yandere stunt, and the fandom did call him out for that, it was understandable, not justifiable, but understandable after spending so much time in his own cage. He would think to cage up Bia too. Bia had her moment of desperation where she asked Lily for a DNA test to scientifically prove who her best match would be, despite the fact that's what got her in this mess in the first place with the love database. But, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures. And of course, Julian had his own action, but I genuinely cannot remember, and it's almost 11 p.m, so I really don't have time to fact check it, but just know that he had his moment too, and you should read the comic and find out what it was. To wrap up my point, LUFF was always about a societal commentary. The romance was a nice touch, but really, it wasn't the star of the show like we thought it was. The characters were amazing, I absolutely adored their development, but it was the world and how they interacted with it that really mattered. From the cheating professor, to Lily's love triangle, to Caro's pregnancy, to every other love story in between, LUFF was just about choosing yourself over the system. And I think that that is honestly one of the best messages I've ever seen in a self-described romance before. So, to those of you who want to use a love triangle in one of your stories, I highly recommend looking at LUFF for good inspiration about how it can transcend the cliches of romance. For those of you who want a good romance, I recommend reading it. And that's that. It's honestly one of my favorite webtoons, and I cannot wait to see what Arachaga does in the future. Thank you for watching the first episode of Webtoon Wednesdays. I really hope you liked it. If you have any advice or feedback, please let me know in the comments, and I will be oh so very grateful if you do. Before you go though, I am curious, what do you think society would look like if we had a love system?